There Will Be Blood is a 2007 American film directed by Paul Thomas Anderson. The protagonist is Daniel Plainview, played by Daniel Day-Lewis, a silver miner turned oil man in search of wealth during the Southern California oil boom of the 19th and 20th centuries.
How big is this room?
The scene begins with Plainview's associate, Fletcher, taking him out of his office to talk about his adopted son, H.W. Fletcher has returned back to Little Boston after admitting H.W. Plainview to a boarding school and is now telling Daniel about his living conditions. In the small conversation, the director and the actor have successfully conveyed the message that Daniel Plainview is concerned about his son, if not emotionally, at least physically and materialistically. This fact confirms that Daniel Plainview's character is more concerned in life about material gains rather than people and their feelings. Earlier in the film, we've seen how after an accident happens during an oil drilling exercise, Daniel leaves injured HW for his colleagues to tend to, and he himself runs off to tend to a more important matter, his oil. We see a fire still burning in the background and a lot of movement of the workers, which tells us that we're in the same space as the drilling fields and also that the work is increasing and more yields are pouring in. Next, we see Plainview going to the Bandy track and talking to William Bandy's grandson and telling him that he wishes to talk to his grandfather. The camera movement and mise-en-scene in this scene are brilliant and follow the pattern of the entire film. In the whole film, the number of shots are smaller, but it never feels like that because of the camera movements and slow reframing of the shots. Here, the first shot is a wide track in where we see Daniel and Henry moving towards the Bandy house and we move inward with them. Then we come inside the house and a short lateral tracking reveals Daniel in the background. Then he comes closer and the entire conversation becomes an over-the-shoulder shot. But the same shot continues and again the camera tracks laterally and reveals Daniel through a window as he looks inside the house and then exits. As he exits, the focus shifts to the background and we see Henry has started hammering down an iron stake into the ground, which will act as a marker for the pipeline. Then at last we see a close-up of the iron rod and Daniel's horse entering the frame in the background. If you remove the two reverse shots of Bandy's grandson, the entire conversation is just one shot and the entire scene is just 4 shots. On the surface, it tells us that Daniel had come to talk, but the subtext tells us that he was already prepared for a positive meeting and had come with his preparations. Even when he fails to meet William Bandy and get his permission, he doesn't change his plan and goes on to mark the pipeline. The following montage is edited rhythmically and takes us into Plainview's perfectionism in work. As the brothers keep on putting markers to the ground, the landscape grows more barren and isolated, suggesting that they are moving more and more away from civilization. They put 4 stakes to the ground. Keeping the religious undercurrent of the film, this might be suggesting the 4 nails that are put into a man's limb during crucifixion. Here the body could be the American land, and the blood that will pour out of the land is the oil, thus fulfilling the film's promise that there will be blood. The final stake in the heart is put in by Daniel himself through the map of America. This marks the fulfillment of Daniel's wish to build a pipeline in collaboration with Union Oil, and thus the music that started with the beginning of his determination ends here with the sound of arrival of a train. After a very brief celebration, which provides a mild relief from the claustrophobic soundtrack, the scene ends and the camera stays with the subject of the next conflict in the film, Henry. As the next scene begins, we literally take a dip in the water with Daniel and Henry. Here, the placement of the camera creates visual tension in the scene automatically as the water rises and drops inevitably. So a bright, beautiful setting of blue skies and clear blue water is turned into a suspenseful scene through camera placement and music, which again starts to take its creepy form slowly. Then we see Daniel in his most emotionally vulnerable point in the film where he, for the first and last time, talks about his childhood and his dreams and aspirations. We see that the seeds of ambition and greed were present in him since his childhood. But again, the dialogues, the acting, and the lensing, and of course the music, tells us that there's something more below the surface. After getting a cold response from his half-brother, Daniel suspects something, or rather, something that he was suspecting was now confirmed. As the camera moves back and we see the 2 of them sitting on the beach, we see Daniel sitting in the light of a new knowledge that he has just gained, while Henry is sitting in the darkness of his ignorance and carelessness. Daniel gets up and moves away from Henry. This is again literal and symbolic of his decision to move away emotionally from his half-brother and observe him from a distance. As Henry is left alone on the beach, P.T. Anderson and Robert Elswit pay a tribute to French painter Jean-Hippolyte Flandrin by recreating the visuals of his painting titled in English, Young Male Nude Seated Beside the Sea. The scene ends with Daniel floating in the water, quite similar to the beginning of the scene, but there's a difference in his expression now. Earlier, he was relaxed and slightly smiling, but now he has a tensed, angry, and disgusted look on his face, thus confirming the fact that Daniel has realized something about his half-brother, and now we'll see him do something about it. The best cinematography is the one which doesn't attract too much attention towards itself and doesn't become greater than the film itself. Robert Elswit's cinematography does exactly that, but he chose to keep the film raw, rustic, and real, rather than making it an eye candy. He shot in extreme midday sunlight and kept the frames full of bright sunlight, thus making the audience feel the heat and lack of shelter in the wide, John Ford-esque panoramic landscape. The use of anamorphic lenses was suitable for capturing the extensive landscape provided in the film. The producer retained some of the human-made features, such as ranches and railroads, for easy identification of the actual location. Most of the scenes take place in Boston, California, which is surrounded by 100 miles of empty terrain. The depth of field is always high, and there are very rare shots of shallow depth of field. Actors' faces are often kept oily and gritty, and he lights the scene to make the oil on the face shine even more. Elswit's images often mirror the mythical and biblical images from paintings, confirming the film's theme. Elswit's images completely justify the atmosphere, mood, tone, and colors demanded by the script. The best part of the cinematographer's craft comes out in the form of his movements. Anderson and Elswit, through the camera movements, often combined multiple shots together and converted one type of shot into another. Very precise decisions of whether the camera will move in with or towards the characters or move away from them have been taken in the film and subconsciously drive the audience's mind. The one department that does rise above the film at some points is the soundtrack. Composed by Jonny Greenwood, the entire score is completely non-diegetic. He has redefined background score and film music with his score and given new meaning to the term. His music doesn't just confirm or amplify what we see, it explains and reinforces. It becomes an audible dictionary to the film, a window into Daniel Plainview's mind and soul. It helps the audience understand the characters and their actions and thoughts. The soundtrack is also very biblical or mythical in its own sense. It is operatic too, but with minimum instruments and chords. It could easily be a soundtrack for a horror film, especially a psychological horror. From the beginning of the film, we are shown that Daniel shows great commitment towards his goals. In an initial scene, Daniel breaks his legs while prospecting silver, and surprisingly manages to crawl out safely with the silver he was mining. The film also shows that even when Daniel is in need of healthcare services, he noticeably keeps an eye on his silver, showing his commitment towards his money despite the pain he is feeling. He would do anything, ranging from manipulation, murder, and lying, if anything became a barrier to his goals. This is particularly evident when he chooses power that the oil drilling plant gave him over his own son. Plainview is viewed as a family man. He adopted a very young boy whose father died in an oil drilling plant accident. Adopting the young boy earns him respect among the villagers. Subsequently, his action in the first part of the film earned him a lot of respect from the viewers. He is intelligent and well-spoken. He promises good-paying jobs and improved standard of living to communities living in areas he visits to drill oil. Although he does not honor his promises, he manages to utilize their land, which places him at the top of the game. Eli Sunday is a gospel preacher with a strong desire to succeed. From their first meeting, it is evident that Daniel hates religion that Eli supports. The two are similar. Eli uses religion for power, while Daniel uses business for power. The two become involved in competition, often testing each other. When events lead to Daniel physically assaulting Eli, all the admirable qualities townfolk and viewers had attributed to Daniel are drastically faded. In Eli Sunday's revenge mission, he uses HW as an arsenal against Daniel. This is the only part where Daniel regrets his past actions and apologizes in front of the townsfolk. We can observe that Daniel is unhappy and regretful for what he has done. In this scene, we can see the real character of Daniel hidden by his ambition and greed for wealth, although his sincerity is questionable. Daniel Plainview has achieved everything he wanted in life. He changes from a quiet prospector to a politician-like businessman, using community resources for personal gain, accumulating his immense wealth. He was dishonest, and his actions often symbolize that business wins over religion, especially when his assault results in Eli Sunday's death, after forcing him to beg for him to accept the land acquisition proposal. Daniel Plainview is in fact one of the most memorable characters in film history. He is the embodiment of 20th century Western materialism, capitalism, and greed and cutthroat competition. Daniel Day-Lewis adds so much depth and layers to this character that he goes beyond the script. Through his speech, pauses, looks, gestures, and body language, he shows us the mind of Daniel Plainview, how he has no regards, love, respect, and care for anyone in the world except for his business.